Our conversation for the next 2 hours is going to be about reproductive health. And we've had this conversation, I think, this is the third time. We had the conversation just 2 weeks ago on IVF. And we had a doctor who specialized in assisted reproduction. Yeah. And we also had somebody who's gone through IVF and has 2 children born out of IVF who are thriving. And she was telling us her life and her experience and talking about that. Now let's talk about the legal framework that we have on IVF. And that's why we've invited Ayieta Lumbasyo, who's an advocate, a bioethicist, and a fertility law specialist. When he had the doctor for IVF, we asked her, ulisomea hii IVF? We'll ask Wakili, unajiita all these, ulienda beyond that, but you'll tell us about it. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
First, Jano is going to give you the day's quote.
Yes, today's quote is by Patrick Moynihan, who was a US senator and sociologist, and he once said, "Everyone is entitled to his opinion, but not his own facts." Do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can leave it there because tukiendelea imekuwa tu debate hapa for 3 hours.
On what is fact?
Especially in something like surrogacy.
Yes.
Some people might feel my opinion is fact. If I feel like there's a moral issue, it's a fact. So you'll take us through those facts and opinions.
Yeah.
I almost wanted to start by, I know we want to understand what it is you do. So maybe we'll start there. But before I forget, I know the question is people often confuse IVF, adoption, surrogacy legally. So you can also kind of break those down, the differences. But just tell us a little bit more about the bioethicist.
Bioethicist is somebody who has gone through school to study about ethical issues surrounding science. Just scientific, whatever. It does not necessarily just mean assisted reproductive technology. It has major other issues in all scientific, whatever, stem cells, all those things. So yes, I went to school. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, of course. So I went through law school and then was sworn in. Then I went to University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg and did a Master of Science in Health Law and Bioethics. Then I did a Master of Science in Clinical Embryology. I'm also an embryologist, which I don't use a lot, and did a Master of Science in Clinical Embryology. And I'm currently doing 2 courses. Maybe I just have too much time on my hands. I need a husband. I'm currently doing an LLM at Daystar University in health, LLM in medical law and ethics, and also doing my PhD at University of Witwatersrand.
Simultaneously?
Yes, I started with a PhD, and then at some point I met guys from Daystar, and they're like, oh, we currently have, Daystar is the only university that actually has LLM, medical law and ethics. So we currently have this program. Why don't you join us and stuff like that? I'm like, why not? It's something that I'm quite interested in. Right. So I'm also doing that, yes.
Oh, that's why that direction? Because you went and studied law.
Yeah.
You went to Kenya School of Law, you passed the bar exam, you admitted to the bar.
Yes.
And then you went back to school to study medicine and science. Why?
I started out as a child rights advocate. I was at ANCAN Kenya, even went for those, I went to Ghana, ANCAN Ghana for 1 year and all that. I was working with Kina Save the Children, Sweden, UNICEF and all that. And then I was young, very young, maybe 25, 26. So all those issues about children being frustrated, molested and all that, I think it kind of put me down. So I left and then went to Transparency International for corruption. We all know how corruption goes in this country. After 2 years, I was like, I can't do it, you know? So I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but my parents, everyone in my family is a doctor, is a medical person doing something in the medical field. Right. So they're like, why don't we have medical, but we don't have the legal bits of the medical. Right. So since you've been interested in this, my parents actually are old-fashioned. They really wanted me to do either law, medicine, or engineering when growing up. But law was the easiest, so that's what I did. So they're like, so since we are all in the medical field, why don't you bring us the legal element of the medicine bit? So University of Witwatersrand was the best bet because of the weather, actually. Yeah, I didn't want to go to Europe and America because I can't do winters.
Spendi baridi.
Yeah.
I feel you. No, thank you for threading us. And I think even your parents were very clever. They knew what they were doing. They're like, yeah, we have one half, we need the other half. But walk us through like those differences Jano had mentioned between surrogacy, IVF, adoption from especially a legal perspective.
Okay, so let's start with IVF. I'm starting with IVF because surrogacy is an offshoot of IVF. People always confuse that. Surrogacy is not a standalone kind of thing. So when you're doing IVF, you go through the whole process of IVF, the stimulation of a woman, and then the harvesting of the eggs, which is called egg retrieval, and then the collection of the sperm, fertilization, and then the resulted embryo. Now, the only difference is instead of putting it back into the woman who's doing the IVF, now you put it in a secondary mother, meaning another uterus, and that is where the surrogacy bit comes in. So you're carrying a pregnancy on behalf of another party. Right. So you see surrogacy and IVF go hand in hand. And surrogacy, if you're just doing IVF alone, you do it by yourself alone and completely from start to end. So the only bit that brings in surrogacy is now transferring the embryo, not necessarily to the woman who started the process, but to a totally different woman. When it comes to adoption, you have no genetic link whatsoever to this child. You go to an adoption agency, you're cleared, and then you are matched with a child, and then you go through the legal process to get an adoption order, you adopt this child. Either way, it's just a way of giving you the right to have parenthood, to be a mother or a father, and they're all viable options.
Currently, does the law allow surrogacy in Kenya?
It does not disallow surrogacy in Kenya.
What does the law say?
It does not disallow.
Let me ask this question in this way.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So a couple decides that they'd like to have a child, but for some reason they are not able to carry the pregnancy.
Yeah.
So they identify another woman who accepts to carry the pregnancy on their behalf.
Yes.
This other woman is the one who's going for antenatal clinics. This other woman is the one who's on record as the one who is carrying the pregnancy. This woman is the one who delivers the baby in a maternity ward. What do the doctors register as the mother of the newborn?
If we are to strictly follow the law, which I hope doctors out there will be doing, so that we can ease on things like child trafficking and stuff like that. When you go to a hospital and give birth, irrespective of how you got the child, the birth notification is actually supposed to mention you. You know, a birth notification is a medical document.
Yep.
A birth certificate is a legal document.
Yep.
Those are very different documents, even though one feeds
into the other.
Yeah.
So a birth notification is supposed to be accurate, straightforward, and have all the details that these parties have. So the person who gives birth, be it the surrogate, has to be named, if you're going to follow the law strictly, has to be put in the birth notification, because it says who gave birth, the name of the child, where this child was born, kgs, and all those other details. Now, there's supposed to be a legal process now transferring that parental rights. Those, when a surrogate is a birth mother, so she has some parental rights by virtue of giving birth.
Yep.
So there's supposed to be a legal process transferring parental rights from this birth mother now to the intended couple, to the intended parents, because most of the time in surrogacy processes, actually in Kenya at the moment, most of the time there's a genetic link to at least one of the intended parents. Either you use the sperm of the husband or partner or the eggs of the mother, but the ideal situation is where you use both gametes. So you see, legally this is their child. So there's supposed to be a legal process transferring those parental rights. But you find, because we do not have a clear-cut law on surrogacy, you will find some people either knowingly or unknowingly putting the birth notification in the intended parent's name. And that is a little bit confusing right now, because for follow-up purposes, and it is such a slippery slope, because what makes you think, for instance, I know Janet's name, so I'm going to use Janet. If I am Janet's surrogate, and then today I go and put Janet's name, what makes you think next time somebody else, Maria, pays me more, and if all it takes is just putting a name on wherever, it will be very easy for us to sell and steal children in that way.
And that's why I was pushing back on when you say the law does not disallow. So the fact that the law is quiet doesn't mean that it is necessarily allowing.
Yes.
Right? What we're saying is that there's no law that recognizes surrogacy. True?
No, there's no explicit law that recognizes surrogacy. However, we have laws that like the Constitution and the Children Act that would be able to feed in a surrogacy matter. Let me explain how.
Okay.
The Constitution gives us what a family is, who is allowed to create a family. Like in Kenya, it's biased. The gays are not allowed to create families and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So already it has given us, it has to be a heterosexual couple or fortunately even single women sometimes. And then it goes on and tells us that a child has to know its origins. So you see there, you can even feed the genetic link through that bit. You can push it, as lawyers we push some wherevers, so you can push it and feed the genetic link. And then once a child has been born, the Children's Act is very clear on how you can transfer parental rights from a person who gave birth to a person who did not give birth. This is in two ways. Parental responsibility, it's a whole chapter in the Children's Act, and adoption process. So in the country, because we do not have a clear-cut law on surrogacy, what we are doing legally, these are people who go to court. 50% of the people will not go to court because some of them will have gotten the birth notification clandestinely in their name, or they will have done other things. We know how Kenya works sometimes. So the people who go to court now, especially for Kenyans, and this is very sad, are forced, I use the word forced, to go through a kinship adoption process. Kinship adoption came into play in 2022 when there was a lot of deaths, people were dying and they're leaving maybe their children, and the sister wants to adopt the children, stuff like that. So you adopt a child that is genetically related to you. So that is the only provision right now that we use to transfer parental rights from a gestational surrogate to the intended parents.
But you see now, even that one, we are still cutting corners. Because kinship is clear. It is Janet and Mariam who are related. Right? And so Janet's child can be adopted by Mariam because Mariam is the auntie to the child. Kin.
As the name suggests.
Stranger called Ayieta cannot become Mariam's kin.
But kin
can be kin to the child.
Yes.
A genetic
link. And this is why I'm saying the genetic link is very important between the child and the intended parents. So that one of the things that actually most courts do is they do a DNA testing. They want a DNA order. They want to see the whole process, the medical process, how it went, to authenticate that at least there was a kinship relation between the child and the intended parent. And then once that has been certified, then they give the adoption order. Have there been cases, just before you come in, Jano, have there been cases where a surrogate has gone through that process and then decided, I'm not giving up this child? In Kenya, fortunately, no. Basically because they always know from the word go. And this is why I'm not so keen about traditional surrogacy. There's gestational surrogacy, there's traditional surrogacy. Surrogacy is where you use the egg of the person carrying. You see, this is her baby from the word go. So in such situations, if the surrogate decides to keep the child, I think it's proper because that's her baby. She has used her egg, you've only given her the sperm. So, but gestational surrogacy, where the surrogate is not genetically related to the child, most of the time they don't keep the child because at the end of the day, all they want is some monetary compensation and not, they already have kids. The reason why, we know surrogates are not high-end people. They come from poverty, they come from low-end sectors of the country. So all they want is maybe some financial gain and stuff like that. So they do not usually want to keep the child. So in Kenya, we've not had a scenario, but in abroad, most of the time, yes, we have had a lot. And most of the time, it actually relates to gay surrogacy, where one party, usually the woman who carries, has some genetic link to this child. And the famous baby M case, the first case of surrogacy in the world, was actually because of that. And the judge actually said then the woman should be part of the whole process and actually keep rights to the child.
I know you, swallowing me. I know. In my head, before I forget, but you'll bring it back, Mariam, if I've gone ahead, was this also commercial surrogacy and altruistic surrogacy? I don't know whether you've gone over that, because that's essentially somebody who is only looking for funds for just like the medical processes for like prenatal, antenatal. It's altruistic. It's like, you don't have to pay me for carrying, but you can facilitate. Then there's the commercial one where you're paying for everything. There's a rate card.
There's a rate card.
Are those also the different types, or are there even more?
Oh, so yes. So in both gestational and traditional surrogacy, there's also the element of altruistic and commercial surrogacy. Altruistic is where, people always think that paying the surrogate, it's not actually paying, compensating the surrogate. There's an element of compensating her for time taken out of her schedule, her work to actually gestate for somebody else. Because pregnancy, I'm 43, I've never been pregnant, so I wouldn't know, but I have heard from friends. Pregnancy it takes a toll on a woman. And sometimes at some point, you wouldn't even go for work and stuff like that. And most of ART, their chances of getting a multiple pregnancy are higher. So you find yourself that you can't go to work and stuff like that. So there's that compensation. That is not commercial surrogacy. Because altruistic, there are women who actually carry, especially relatives. I've had sisters carry for their sisters, cousins, aunties, friends even. And those are some of the best surrogacy arrangements because most of these people are on equal level. The negotiating power is the same and there's no element of exploitation. When we come to commercial surrogacy, this is where some parties that are not related to the agreement actually benefit. Who are these parties? Agencies, for instance, because you will find they're the ones who will get a mountain of the amounts. Many other parties that are not related to the surrogacy are not necessarily the doctors because the doctors are offering a service, lawyers are offering a service, counselors are offering a service, but any other party that is not necessarily directly related to the surrogacy arrangement, getting monies is where commercial surrogacy comes in. Yeah.
Wait, so... My gosh, I have a lot of questions.
They're all swimming.
Yeah, they're all swimming in my head. Because when you said altruistic versus commercial, my initial first thought was altruistic is like you described, a family member, someone, carrying a child for someone else, but that's someone that they know, that they have some sort of relationship with, and not for commercial gain, except for you're facilitating medical bills, etc. Then commercial, I thought, is where you don't have a relationship with that person, but there is a clear monetary incentive outside of medical bills, and that this is my rate, and this is how much whatever I'm charging. Yeah. Is that not commercial surrogacy?
As Janet said, that phrase, opinions and stuff like that. Because you see, when I'm compensating you for time taken out of whatever you're supposed to be doing, does that amount to commercial? If I may just to throw the question back to you, is it a commercial transaction? Because if I was not caring for you, I would be going about doing my work.
Yes.
I would be earning my own monies. Yes. I would be doing my thing. But because I'm caring for you and I'm stuck in the house, just caring for you, then I am entitled at least to be compensated whatever amount that I was supposed to. What we refuse is extra compensations. You see, like there's an amount, like even legally, people will tell you sometimes even when somebody dies and you go to court, the court actually awards you some compensation of the life that person would have lived. And that's imaginary. It's not like clear cut. So when it comes to commercial surrogacy, anything that is it's not benefiting. The parties to a surrogacy arrangement are actually supposed to be the the intended parents and the surrogate. You see, and then the service providers around it, meaning the doctors, the lawyers, and all that. But when you have other parties, like say people who are recruiting these agents, people who are housing these surrogates, people who are doing all that, and for some reason in Kenya, actually they're the ones who get more monies. Like there's someone I sent to a flyer for a surrogacy agency. Do you know they were actually charging 6.4 million, and then the surrogate at the end gets 800,000.
So the agency is what? Is a go-between. So it's basically an agency.
Brokers.
It's a broker.
Yeah, brokers, the go-betweens. And actually most countries that have banned commercial surrogacy have actually banned agencies.
Understand? I was just starting with the question.
Write
just
it down.
The idea of commercial, I've written them all down because I'm still stuck on.
Yeah.
And I get that it can be in bad taste when you use the word commercial here, but then it's really hard. Because if I say I'm coming to work, I could be working somewhere else, but I'm working here, so NMG is compensating me for my time here.
It's payment.
It's payment, yes.
Let's just call it what it is.
Let's take a break, but we can come back and deliberate on that, talk a little bit more about, the bill and what, I guess it was supposed to address all of these things. We'll just get more information, but it is coming up to 8:30. We'll come back after the break and continue this conversation. We're coming back to the conversation. Just two comments here. Samuel Wanjao says she must be a genius because all that knowledge when you listed your entire CV.
I don't even have a husband yet. My cousin tells me that.
Well,
those are
Those are
They have nothing to do with each other.
none at all. None at all. Finally, Lucy Mutaumu says, very enlightening. Good job, Ayieta. So, yeah, I think it is very enlightening.
It is.
Let's get back to some of the layers we were trying to get through. I think we'd stopped at commercial, altruistic, and then we moved to what the law is supposed to do, and also the exploitation that exists. In all this, I don't want to say I feel bad. I do feel bad. Maybe there's people who genuinely do this really well.
Yes.
I think some people will wonder, why choose surrogacy? What was the ethical matter that you brought up at the beginning of the show, Mariam?
So just in general, the ethics around surrogacy. Wow, where do I begin? So one is the exploitation element, which is, again, there's always, and you alluded to this, the power imbalance that's often there between surrogates and the intended parents, right? And that's why I was very trying to understand when it's a commercial surrogacy, because there's that issue of a power imbalance. So would this person be carrying this child for someone else if they had another source of income, for example, if they had an alternative stream, if they were able to make ends meet? Because this is not si kazi ya kawaida, it's not showing up to work. So maybe, begin by addressing those ethics issues.
Most of the time, actually, in Kenya, as I've said, the surrogates are from low-end income, unless it's altruistic and your sister, cousin, friend is caring for you. So most of the time, they're actually doing it for the monetary benefit. That we have to agree, we have to acknowledge that. However, in first world countries like US, UK, Australia, you must have a source of income before you're allowed to be a surrogate. You see, that way the power, wherever, comes into play. And then in those countries, you must meet the intended parent. And this negotiation happens actually between the two of you. In Kenya, we have left that to agencies. So they're the ones negotiating. You find intended parent has been told that we are going to pay 1.5 million to the surrogate, and the surrogate ends up with 600,000 or 50,000. So where is this extra money going to?
Operations expenses.
Not necessarily, but operation expenses for 1 million, like that's too much.
You
You
give
see,
an example of 6.4?
6.4 million, and the surrogate gets 800,000. And you see in the list, it has been said that maybe treatment will cost 1.4 million. IVF treatment is expensive, that I acknowledge. It's the minimum is around 500,000, 600,000, and sometimes you have to go 2 or 3 cycles before you can actually get. So 700,000 times 2, maybe that's 1.4. Surrogate 800,000. So where is the remaining 4 million going to? You see, that is the agency that is benefiting. And some centers have actually colluded with these agencies, so they are making money more out of the surrogacy bit than they are even from the IVF bit, because that 4 million, you see, it's not the agent alone who's going to eat that money. And at the end of the day, we really need to protect these girls. There are good agencies, that I will acknowledge. There are people who have gone through very good agencies. They've been able to be taken care of. They've been sustained through all this. But there are some exploitative services and things that go on. Some of them include, for instance, some of these surrogates don't even know who they are caring for. You never meet the intended parent. I don't know why blind surrogacy has come into Kenya a lot, and a lot of countries actually don't do blind surrogacy. That is called blind surrogacy, where you do not meet your part. So it's the agent negotiating from the word go, not even the doctor or wherever. You know, doctors and lawyers have ethical guidelines and ethical wherever. So if you exploit them, you will be sanctioned by your professional body. Agencies are not registered. They do not have them. We have very good agencies that actually insist on you meeting the intended parent. And you know, you're supposed to come out with a contract. And this contract is supposed to be between the two of you. How am I supposed to negotiate with Janet, for instance, to carry for her a child? Or how do I even know how the negotiation went in if I don't even know her? I've never met her. I don't know, you know, and stuff like that. So the negotiation power imbalance there. So that brings in elements of exploitation. The other day, I think it was on your TV, Net and TV or something like that, where some of these girls are housed. These are grown women, because surrogate is supposed to be 25 years and above. We don't have the laws, but we already have an inbuilt regulation because we are following standards, international protocol and stuff like that. So one of the key requirements is a surrogate must have a child, and the age that a lot of people have alluded to is 25 years and above, because by virtue of having a child who's at least 3 years old, it means maybe you got it at 21, you know, so you are a grown-up and stuff like that.
So a surrogate must have a child?
Yes, because a pregnancy, as I've said, it's a very technical process.
Yes.
During pregnancy, you may even lose your womb.
Yeah.
You may die. You may whatever, and then you become a patient. Now, instead of helping somebody else, you need to be helped.
Right.
So one of the key requirements is a surrogate must have a child. So you find these women, 25 and above year old, being put in a hostel-like environment. The UN rapporteur on violence and whatever actually said that is one of the worst forms of abuse, you know, because what we tell ourselves, we call it fancy names, that we are looking after them, we are ensuring that they do not have sex, you know, we are ensuring that they take medical, nini. But all those are just fancy words for, you know, because these girls actually do not have informed consent. You need to have the full information and whatever. And if you tell them, if you're not going to stay in a hostel in the house, then you're not going to be part of the process, of course she'll allow, and she'll say she has consented to it.
Yeah.
But who is it benefiting? Who is it benefiting? So I always say, I'm a 43-year-old woman. Aki musichukulie your age seriously. Maybe just have 40.
It's just a number.
I'm a
number.
43-year-old woman. I don't have kids. I had extensive myomectomy where I had 39 fibroids removed. And as such, I'm actually a prime candidate for surrogacy. But my rights should not override the rights of another person. Surrogacy is a beautiful thing. As long as it's done right, it's done well, and nobody is exploited in the process.
What I'm hearing here, everything that you're saying, Wakili, is because we do not have laws and regulations in this country, we have criminal elements who've just come in and taken advantage of very many people, taken advantage of an intended parent who is just looking to get a child and a woman who is looking for an income.
Yes.
And they're just told, umeshapata mtoto? Bas. Here, I'm going to give you 600,000 shillings after 9 months. And this is how we go about it. So it's a criminal enterprise that's thriving here. And even everything else that you're saying, you know, we have some own internal regulations and therefore and so on and so forth, minus the regulations from at government level, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Because everybody will come in and they're playing their own jungle game.
Right.
So it's just a huge problem in this country.
Yes.
Happening silently underwater. And very, very unfair to very many people.
And it's a big business. Surrogacy is a big business.
We're becoming a surrogacy destination.
It is a destination. We were even cited, like there's elements of child trafficking through surrogacy in Kenya. American, I'm naming it here so that they can claim and wherever. I say they're seeing some elements of child trafficking through surrogacy, because now we are even having issues where people are actually bringing in embryos from abroad. If you create your own embryos, for instance, if you went and you went for treatment in Turkey. Most of us go to Turkey. I've never been to Turkey. This is natural.
We were told that by the doctor.
So you go to Turkey and create embryos, and then most countries will actually do whatever. If it's your own, for your own use, they will create for you embryos. It doesn't matter if you have a sexually transmitted disease, but because who said you can't have children just because you are HIV? You know, like people do it naturally, so why not through IVF? They will create for you embryos in whatever state you are. But you see, these embryos are supposed to be for your personal use. So all the risks you're taking are for your personal risks. But now you find some of these parties will import these embryos to Kenya and then transfer them into a girl who has never met the intended parents because they're supposed to be working under wherever, has a contract which she has never seen. She just signed because most of these agencies do not actually give the girls a copy of the contract, and the contract is not, and then they just transfer the embryos. So I keep saying, if you have personal embryos that you've created abroad, fine, use them. But if you want to transfer to a third party, can you just create the embryos afresh from Kenya? We claim we have, and which claim is true, we have very fantastic doctors here. And why can't they just do that? Because at the end of the day, we are so protective of the intended parents, which is allowed, which is good actually. But why are we just letting the surrogates? We are not even protecting them and stuff like that.
Oh gosh.
So the bill, maybe that is a question you will come to.
Yes. Let's segue actually into the bill. But just before that, the contract, you've said a lot of the times these women don't have access to these contracts. They don't see them. And you've talked about how, we've been cited for potential trafficking. Do we have any idea about the numbers of surrogacy in Kenya? Like any inkling as to how many people are having children via surrogates in Kenya?
We actually don't, because we don't have like a record keeping wherever. Every center has their own records. We don't share records. That is something the bill has actually taken care of. They've said we have to put it down. And the fact that other people just do it clandestinely under the waters, then the courts, you can't also get the records from the court, because if everyone was going through court, you would go to court and ask how many have you gone through. So we don't have the numbers, unfortunately.
It's a criminal enterprise. You will never know how many criminals.
How many criminals? Oh, we have doctors who actually have. Okay, let me not say that.
Doctors who are it's okay.
Who will actually just go ahead and
tell you casually
and stuff like that. As long as you bring, as long as you're wherever. I was shocked the other day when one doctor said, I don't even know what happens in the wherever. An agency just drops off the embryos and we just do the transfer and wherever. And this is from a medical doctor.
Yeah,
and you're like, are you for real?
It's just that corruption. It will permeate
everywhere.
It can find a way.
So let's talk about the bill then. I think I remember Joyce Lay, when she was a woman rep for Taita Taveta in 2013, around 2015, she started raising these conversations.
Yes.
And Winnie Mabona as well picked it up. And now there's a bill that has passed the National Assembly. It's gone to the Senate. It's the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill.
Yes.
What are the pros and what are the cons of this bill from where you sit?
First of all, I have to congratulate Millie Mabona, Honorable Millie Mabona. I'm just saying it casually as if she's my equal, for the bill. She has been passionate about assisted reproductive technology, reproductive health, and all that. So the bill started in 2014. She will tell you how far she has fought. We had a 2014 bill which was phased out. It didn't go far. We had a 2017 bill. We had a 2019 bill. And this is, I think, the fourth bill. And in my opinion, it is actually one of the best at the moment, because it has considered both elements. It has given access and as well as bringing in restraints to practice the process well, especially on the IVF and even parts of the surrogacy bit. So what are the cons? One of the things, the bill as it is, personally, I'm okay with it, except maybe for the genetic link. I will explain why. One of the things that the bill has done, which I think is commendable, is it has insisted that these services be provided for Kenyans. Kenyans living, as in for Kenyans, accessibility is restricted to Kenyans. Kenyans in Kenya, Kenyans living abroad, Kenyans married to foreigners,
citizens.
Kenyan citizens, anything of Kenyan element. As long as you have a Kenyanese, even Miguna, who was removed the citizenship and given birth, it's still entitled. Is entitled. So that way, it is easier to create laws that will protect us as a people. We are busy opening up our sectors when we've not even been able to protect our own nationalities. So this bill gives access to all Kenyans. And the only thing that I would want to add there is maybe it should give Kenyans and maybe legal residents. Because there are people who have lived here for long and they are going to live here for an unforeseeable future. What does this do? This means we can create laws, even including registration processes, because the bill says that you don't even have to go to court if you are genetically related to the child. Right. You will get a birth notification at the hospital. So you see, if it is for Kenyans, we can be able even to amend our birth notification. I'm not sure if you've seen the birth notification recently. No. Kitambo, the birth notification used to be male, female only. Now we even have intersex. Yep. So we can be able to amend according to our laws and stuff like that. So it can be able, once that has been passed, then we can be able to amend this so that we can provide for the intended parents an easier way of registering this child. Because sometimes, as much as I am pro court process so that you can avoid trafficking, sometimes I feel for these parents because they've gone through infertility. It's a stigma in Kenya. 23 years down the line, we have actually the first IVF baby in Kenya was born in 2005, so we are way ahead, but we still have that stigma. So imagine going through the infertility stigma and then going through adopting your own child.
Right.
So it becomes a little bit complicated because the only process now is through kinship adoption. But if we put the borders and decide this is what we are going to do as Kenyans, and Millie has said that a lot, if this is what we are going to do as Kenyans, then that. So closing the borders for me is a plus, because now we can create laws, see how the laws work, and then be able to open. And a lot of countries have closed. Most countries have actually closed these borders, and that way you avoid trafficking and exploitation. Secondly, the bill has actually provided for an easy way of registration of children born out of surrogacy, and that comes in, it plays into my first point. So it has come into an easier way of registering these children so that it is, because now it is actually the foreigners who have an easier time. All they need to do is to go to court, get a parental order, and go to their embassies and have the child registered as a child born abroad and stuff like that, because they have the laws. Us, we have to still go through an adoption process. So it has eased that bit.
Okay.
Thirdly, it has banned
So what does
commercial
it do?
surrogacy.
Sorry, earlier it said the person who has gone and given birth is going to be registered.
Yeah.
On the birth notification.
Birth notification will have birth parent.
Yeah.
Now you're saying birth notification can have birth
Parent and the intended. Yes,
parent.
yes. You see, that way it will be very easy, especially for our own laws. We can all just come together and change the Birth and Death Registrar Act so that we can have that element, and it becomes easy. And then thirdly, the bill has banned commercial surrogacy. I shudder. Maybe I'm not so wise, but I always shudder at the point where you say you are banning commercial surrogacy but allowing agencies. How does that work?
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, as in it's an oxymoron. Yeah, even if you have to regulate this and stuff like that, it's an oxymoron. So because they have banned that, there are other ways that we can go about it. We have adoption agencies which do not profit from whatever they do. So we can adopt that system where we have adoption agencies, surrogacy agencies, like the adoption agency, that will now filter who is supposed to be a surrogate. And we actually don't do background check on the intended parent. You are putting this intended parent with the surrogate, but you're so keen on perusing maneno ya surrogate and the intended parent hatujafanya kitu yoyote. So this agency will be able to do that, and they can even give pre-birth orders, like in the case of South Africa. You give pre-birth orders before even the transaction starts, before even the medical process starts, so that they already know that there's a genetic link. One thing, mentioning about genetic link, one thing the bill has said is you don't have to have a genetic link to surrogacy. And that is something that I'm not agreeable to, because if you do not have a genetic link, if you're not using your egg or your partner's sperm, or you then why not just adopt? I know it is insensitive coming from me.
What does that mean? It means that let me use
the same way we had said Janet and Mariam are
Jano.
sisters.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, sawa.
Jano, as the intended parent, comes with Mariam's egg and puts it into Ayieta's womb.
Yeah.
And then Jano will be the parent.
Yes.
She has absolutely no connection at all.
And even to her partner. One of the things is you have to have a genetic link to at least one of the intended parents. But now the bill imesema you can just do without necessarily have a genetic link, and now everything goes.
And it doesn't even say how you acquire the egg.
No, it doesn't. Oh, well, the bill says about donor conception. There's something called donor conception, where you can get donors and stuff like that. So Mariam can donate.
Mariam and her partner can donate.
Even Mariam and her partner actually can donate
to
Janet, and then I carry, and then you see this child now becomes Janet. But one thing that it has said to cure that process is apparently after that has happened, you have to go to court to officially adopt. You tell me, who is going to go to court if the birth notification is already being given in, whatever.
Wait,
and how is
I'm
the
trying
hospital?
to understand. So if I, as Janet, am interested in having a child, I can find somebody to carry.
Yeah.
Let's use this.
Let's just use this table.
Okay.
Because I feel like this is something I've seen happen. I
Yeah.
can see how, on one hand, it's problematic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even celebrities, a lot of them actually are the ones who've normalized this abroad.
Yeah.
You'll have a Kardashian. I should have used somebody else, but
it's the one that comes to mind.
they're the one that come to mind.
Yeah.
So Kardashian, wealthy, for whatever reason, either unable to or does not want to carry a child, finds a surrogate, somebody who just comes up on the agency and this is a good person, she's a good fit, she's of sound mental health, and she's ready to do this. So you do the journey where you check in with each other. I think I remember them checking in with each other. How is it going? Do you have any pains? And then at the end of the day, she gives birth to the child and says, here, Chloe, this is your baby.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying is problematic.
No, it's in the case
fine.
now.
Yes.
So that was it, but it's the Kardashian, the egg, the what?
The owner of
Gametes.
the egg.
Yes,
The gametes are called gametes.
Yes,
the
gametes.
egg
The
and
male and female
sperm
gametes
come from the Kardashians themselves.
Yes.
That's
You
in
see,
this
that's their
case.
child.
Yes.
But what we are talking about here is where there's no genetic link. It's a donor egg a donor sperm and a surrogate.
Why would you?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's where we are.
That's where the question marks
That's where the
because it
question
could be
marks
for
come
whatever-
in, because it can be for whatever reason, it can be for whatever. But just to point out before I forget, when you mentioned the Kardashian bit, the bill has actually even insisted that you must have a medical reason to do surrogacy. You just don't go and do because you don't want to grow fat or what, or you don't whatever. So that is something progressive. You must have a medical reason for why you cannot carry a pregnancy for you to use another woman's uterus.
I know.
Sorry, Jano.
No,
I was trying to think through what could have been happening as this bill was being drafted, and specifically that clause on not needing a genetic link. Was it meant to be in the event that both parents are incapable of conception?
Yes.
Then they're still able to, then have a child. But then, if there's no genetic link to the child, adoption.
Yeah.
So, we are about to go to
Actually, that was the rationale, that there are couples who can, both of them do not have gametes. But as lawyers, we said, in such situations, can we just go through an adoption process? Because we already have these children who are not genetically related to you.
Right.
Why go through a medical process to give birth to a child who is not genetically related to you? And you know the problem about this bill, the problem about this issue, let me just point out, is it's supposed to be a child focused bill. If we create these children who are not genetically related, as I said, we are now 24 years into IVF surrogacy manenos in Kenya. So now we are seeing cases coming to court, cases where children were born through not even necessarily surrogacy, normal but donor conception, where they used an egg donor or a sperm donor. Husbands are getting dogondogos and marrying and taking their wives to court and saying, I want full custody. And one of the things they say is, this child is not even genetically related to her. So can you do DNA? And you find they're not genetically related. And then they take the child away from the woman and stuff like that. So we are trying to protect the child as much as we are trying to treat infertility and bring smiles and families. At the end result is the child. So what I always say and what I pray is that, can we put the child's best interest at heart?
I think that's a really good place to always center such a conversation. Let's go to before we run out of time, Francis Odhiambo is saying, good job, Wakili. Question, what happens if the surrogate dies in the process of delivery? Who is responsible and who can be held to account on this?
Actually, the intended parent is supposed to be held accountable. We are supposed to be, and the bill has alluded to that, take insurance for the surrogate. At the moment, I can tell you for a fact they don't do that. So if the surrogate dies, they just say, oh, we told them that part of pregnancy is the surrogate can die.
It could go
so
either
it
way.
is a risk that you're taking. It could go either way. It's a risk you're taking. But the bill is very straightforward. It says they have to take insurance for the surrogate, both for medical and for life insurance in case they die, because they'll be leaving behind children when they die.
I have testimony here from former Taita Taveta woman, Rep. Joyce Lay, who says, I was lucky. She went through surrogacy.
Yes.
And she's talked about it publicly. She says, I was lucky I got a friend who volunteered without monetary gain. She was a married mother of 2. There was legal agreement, and I took care of her throughout. The notification of birth came with her name. And I had to adopt my own child, a process that took 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the person who actually carried the pregnancy was registered as the mother of the child. And now Joyce and her husband had to actually go through the adoption process, like you're saying, which is a long and tedious route of your own child. You're there with your child in your house because this mother was willing to actually give you the child, but they're not yours until the court determines.
Exactly.
If this bill fails again, because it has failed before. Now it's going to the Senate. And in fact, I remember even Millie Maboma saying, I expect that maybe the Senate, if the Senate raises questions, we'll have to go through mediation. The period between now and the end of this 13th Parliament is very short. If it does not go through, we have to start again from square one. What happens in the meantime? What would you tell people, like the do's and don'ts of surrogacy in this country?
So the do's and don'ts, just to be safe, make sure that one, there's a genetic link to the intended parent. That way, even if the surrogate decides maybe in the rare situation to run away with your child, you can always report them, DNA can be done, and of course, it will be conclusive evidence that this is your baby. 2, it is important, I don't know how to stress this, for you to meet the surrogate. Either if you want, maybe you're a famous person, you don't want to meet this person, use a friend, use a third party. So that way, it is very easy for you to know what element, surrogates, they're just human beings. The way they're treated will also go hand in hand with the way they carry the pregnancy. So that way it will be very easy for you to know who your child is. We've seen cases where doctors and fertility centers have been reported there was no genetic link, the surrogate, what, they are, taking themselves to court. But if you've walked the journey with your surrogate, it is very easy for you to know what ails them, what the help they need, and stuff like that. Right. 3, have an agreement in place before start of treatment. It changes everything. There's before start of treatment, there's during treatment, there's after treatment. Right. What do I mean? Before start of treatment, it shows the intention behind it. The agreement may not be enforceable, but it shows the intention behind it, the responsibilities of each party and all that. That does not mean that when the surrogate gets pregnant. No, before you even start the medical process. During the process, it can go either way. It can mean that you are the intended parent or the surrogate is. But when you do it after the surrogate is already pregnant, it means it's her child. You see now that, Nini, because it's an afterthought.
We have to pause there. We really needed this to go on. Hope we'll come back, but we've been speaking to Ayieta Lumbasyo, who's an advocate and bioethicist, fertility law specialist. In the next hour now, we get that sort of like human case study. Yes. We have Lorna Fidelia, who's a gestational surrogate. She'll talk about her journey of surrogacy and maybe react or reflect on anything that's been said during this conversation. It's now coming up to 9 a.m.